All right, Orion, let's keep fresh in your head what you have learned this year with some Clep prep. Who were the first European explorers in America? Vikings, 1000 AD. What was Christopher Columbus actually looking for? The Northwest Passage. What was the Northwest Passage? It was a passage that would take them directly to Asia. What caused the English to have interest in the New World? Three things: enclosure movement, primogeniture, and Protestant Reformation. The enclosure movement made land very scarce in England. Primogeniture meant that only the eldest son could inherit the land, and the Protestant Reformation was part of what made them want to leave so they could pursue religious freedom. Discuss and describe the settling of North America by the English. Tell me about two people in particular. Okay, Sir Humphrey Gilbert in Newfoundland in 1583. This was a failure. Sir Walter Raleigh had two attempts at founding a colony on Roanoke Island, one in 1586 and one in 1588. Both of these were failed attempts, and the second attempt became known as the Lost Colony because it completely disappeared without a trace. And then finally, the British were successful with a permanent colony in Jamestown, 1607. Let's talk about the beginnings of the Virginia colony. Tell me about the beginnings of it. At first, it was what? Yeah, plagued by poor location and unskilled workers. Who was its elected leader? Captain John Smith. What year? 1608. Virginia was famous for two firsts. The first being in 1619, the House of Burgesses, first legislative body, and the second being the first to legalize slavery in 1660. Also, what saved the Virginia colony? Tobacco, of course. Now let's talk about how Virginia became known as a royal colony. First, what year did it become known as a royal colony? 1624. Why was it known as a royal colony? Well, because all the Cavaliers settled there. Who were the Cavaliers? They were supporters of the king. Finish this sentence. Wealthy colonists began claiming the coastal land, and then you know the rest. They began pushing the poor people further inland where they were attacked by Indians, and the House of Burgesses really didn't care. This led Nathaniel Bacon to start Bacon's Rebellion, and they ended up burning Jamestown to the ground. Let's talk about some of the other colonies. Maryland, what year? 1634. What kind of colony was it? Proprietary, meaning that what? Proprietary colony means that one person owned it. In Maryland's case, it was Lord Baltimore. Maryland prospered because of what? Tobacco. Tell me three things about North Carolina. Okay, one, it was settled by Virginians. Two, it quickly acquired a reputation as being independent and democratic. Three, the colonists avoided North Carolina because they felt it was overrun by pirates. What can you tell me about South Carolina? Yes, it was a proprietary colony established in what year? 1670. Tell me one other fact about South Carolina. It hosted a large number of religious groups. What was its crop? It was rice and indigo. In fact, I forgot to ask you what North Carolina's crop was. North Carolina was tobacco. Georgia, its proprietary colony, established 1733. Its crop that it was known for was, again, rice and indigo, like South Carolina. And one important fact about Georgia, it was used as a buffer zone between the colonists and the Indians, and it was populated almost exclusively with criminals and people who owed money, debtors. Describe economic life in the southern colonies. Well, in the early days of the southern colonies, most people lived on small farms. The rich owners of coastal plantations there wielded enormous power. Describe social life in the southern colonies. What did they engage in? Well, their time was filled with dancing, card playing, hunts, and large community dinners. It was extremely difficult to move up in the blank social hierarchy in the South. The rich colonists took the best land and thus were able to maintain their positions in the economy and in the government. Blank was considered to be the state with the least social stratification. Answer to that is North Carolina. The average man in the southern colonies could expect to live blank years, 35. Was education a high priority in the South? No, it was not. Was it easy to get an education? Again, no, it was not. And the reason for this was people were too scattered. The population was too far apart. So the wealthy people's answer to education would be to one of two things. One, either hire a tutor or send them off to a big school, college, William and Mary. What else they got in here? Harvard, Yale. Now, for the less affluent people, they were more likely that they would receive education through an apprentice, being an apprentice and learning from a craftsman. Discuss and describe religious and political life in the southern colonies. Well, in all the southern colonies, the Anglican Church was supported by taxes. Anyone who wanted to enter politics had to be a member of the church. The southern colonies had the greatest degree of religious toleration, and each southern colony had what? Three things: a governor, governor's council, and an assembly. Discuss and describe the beginning of the slave trade in the southern colonies. In the very beginning, hold on, is this working? In the very beginning, the Native Americans and indentured servants did most of the labor, but that went over to a system of African slaves. These slaves were taken in wars between African chiefs, where they would have a war, then they would capture all these slaves, and then they would sell them to other European traders, or trade them, not really sell, for guns so they could defend themselves from other slave traders. How and when was slavery legalized in the southern colonies? Well, between 1640 and 1660, the southern colonies slowly evolved from the indentured servants over to one of slavery. And then finally, a key marker in this was 1661, Virginia became the first colony to legalize chattel slavery for life. Now, chattel slavery for life made it such that a child of a slave would also be a slave, so you would be born into slavery. The number of slaves increased dramatically in the 1680s. After what? What happened? The Royal African Company lost its monopoly, and the industry was thrown open to anyone. Virginia established slave codes to keep revolts down. What were these slave codes? Well, they weren't taught to read, they could not gather together, they could not have weapons, and they could not leave the plantation without written permission. Discuss and describe the early resistance to slavery. Well, many slaves did resist, but they died as a result. They would be executed in front of their peers to act as a deterrent. And who said what about slavery? Well, the Quakers were an example of resistance to slavery, rhetorically speaking. In the year 1688, they declared slavery was inhuman and a violation of the Bible. Give me an example of a guilt-racked former slave trader. John Newton. He's famous for what? The song Amazing Grace. Slaves could only become free if what? They proved that they were half white or they bought their freedom. All right. The Puritans. No, sorry. Who were the Puritans? Well, they believed in the idea of predestination, which meant that God already chose which people will go into heaven. Who were the Pilgrims? Well, they were Puritans who wanted to fully separate from the Church of England. So what did they do? They got permission from the Virginia Company to settle in the northern part of Virginia in 1620, and the Plymouth Company was commissioned and the Mayflower set sail. What was one of the earlier moves of the group on the Mayflower? What did they agree to? They agreed to the Mayflower Compact. What did it say? Well, it basically said that they would be bound to the will of the majority. So if a majority of people wanted to do something, that's the way it would be done. All right. Discuss the Puritans in the Massachusetts colony. The Puritans established a colony of Massachusetts Bay in what year? 1630. What did they hope to do? purify the Church of England and then return to Europe with a new improved religion. Were the Massachusetts Bay Puritans a successful colony? Yes, they were. Tell me about their leadership. Their leadership was good. John Winthrop. The local government was inextricably bound with the church. Therefore, only church members were allowed to vote for the general court. The Puritans established a Bible Commonwealth that would last 50 years. And during this time, Old Testament law was the law of the community. All right. The Massachusetts Bay Puritans were known for two things: religious intolerance and a general suspicion of democracy. One of the people who was kicked out of the colony for blasphemy was Roger Williams. He went on to found a colony. What was that colony? Providence. He also founded a church. What was that church? The Baptist Church. The Puritans generally felt that the common people were what? Incapable of governing themselves and should be looked after by their government. Good Lord. All right. Discussing this. Okay. During the English Civil War, the Puritans tried to what? Separate from the Church of England. So they issued the Body of Liberties, which stated that what? Massachusetts Bay was independent of England and was therefore no longer bound by English civil law. In blank year, blank was formed and consisted of these four colonies. Those four colonies are Massachusetts Bay, New Plymouth, New Haven, and Connecticut River Valley. They all formed the New England Confederation in 1643. What was the goal of this confederation? To protect the colonists from the French and the Indians. The impertinence of Massachusetts Bay was a constant annoyance to King Charles II, and he thus punished them by granting charters to rival colonies in where? Connecticut and Rhode Island, and by creating the Dominion of New England. What was the purpose of this organization? To boost trade by enforcing the Navigation Acts of what 2 years? What two Navigation Acts? 1660 and 1663. What did these Navigation Acts say? They stated that all trade had to be done on English ships and had to pass through England before it could go anywhere. A rebellion against the Dominion probably would have occurred if the blank in England had not ended prematurely. The answer to that is the Glorious Revolution. The land settled by the Puritans was rocky and bare, and it took tremendous labor to what? Live off it. Massachusetts had an extremely blank population, homogeneous. The reason for this was there was little reason to stay there unless, why? You wanted to be among people of the same faith. Non-Puritan immigrants usually moved south. Because agriculture was so tricky, a more blank economy developed in New England than existed in the South. The answer, diverse. Puritans engaged in what things as examples of this diverse economy? Well, fishing, trapping, and there were a number of craftsmen in each town. Were there slaves in New England? Yes, there were. Were there as many as in the South? No, there weren't. Slaves in New England were commonly used as what? Household servants rather than hard labor. There was more of a chance for blank in Massachusetts than any other colony in America. Answer, social mobility. This was mainly due to the what? Answer, diverse economy. As for religion, was it important? It was extremely important. It dominated every area of an individual's life. The Puritan church was known as the Congregational Church. A group called the Blank warned that the people were in danger of lapsing into atheism. Answer, Jeremiads. Around this time, ministers began to offer blank. Answer, halfway covenants, which gave church members, answer, partial privileges. During the 1690s in New England, there was still a strong belief in, answer, Christian mysticism. Many people, okay, skip that. This led to what? Answer, 19 women and 1 man being executed for, answer, witchcraft. In what year? Answer, 1692. The witch trials only stopped when, answer, people in high places began being accused. The Salem witch trials did what to the image of the clergy? Answer, it tarnished it tremendously. All right, moving along. What was the Great Awakening? Answer, a religious revival in New England. When? In the 1730s and 40s. Why did it happen? Answer, it began in response to growing secularism. Who was one of the most famous preachers of this time? Answer, Jonathan Edwards. The Great Awakening was, answer, what was the first mass movement in America? Answer, now that I've already given it away, the Great Awakening. What did it help do? Answer, break down the divides between the various regions of the British colonies. So, let's see. The New England colony started out as, answer, Bible commonwealths, where biblical law was the local law and the man standing in his church determined political power. Politics, however, came to be dominated by the wealthy. Life expectancy in the New England colonies was how long? Roughly what it is today. Was education important in New England? Yes, it was. Was it easy to get? Yes, it was, because most people lived close to a town, and it made it very possible to receive inexpensive training. Okay, the blank company hired blank to search for blank. Answers, the Dutch East India Company hired Henry Hudson to search for the Northwest Passage. Instead, what did he do? Well, he journeyed up the Hudson River and claimed the area now known as New York. For who? The Dutch. So the Dutch purchased Manhattan Island from the Manhattan Indians for how much? $24. And they established a town called New Amsterdam. Pennsylvania means Penn's Woods. The colony was established by William Penn. In what year? Don't say 1683. It's 1681. 1681. The main religious group to settle in the area was the Society of Friends, otherwise known as Quakers. Quakers believed three things: that every person should communicate with the divine, or every person could communicate with the divine. Not sure if that's what I said. The second one is that the church should not be supported by tax dollars, and three, that all men are equal. In Pennsylvania, voting rights were extended to what two types of people? Landholders or large taxpayers. Blank established a unicameral legislature working alongside a governor. We're talking about Pennsylvania here still. Answer, Charter of Liberties. The Charter of Liberties established a unicameral legislature working alongside a governor. In what year? 1701. All right, that was the first group of cards. On to the next. Okay, what were the middle colonies? Name them. All four of them. Actually, five, technically. All right, New York, Pennsylvania, Delaware, East and West Jersey. I don't know if you should count them separate as five or four, but East and West Jersey. They shared characteristics with what? New England and the southern colonies. The economy there was diverse. Blank and blank would gradually become crucial in the port cities of blank and blank. Answers, shipping and commerce, crucial to the port cities of Philadelphia and New York. There were plenty of blank in the middle colonies. Answer, slaves. Who treated them well and who treated them poorly? The Dutch treated their slaves well. The English did not. People in these colonies tended to have a healthier lifestyle than their neighbors to the south, and therefore they tended to live longer. The diverse economy made blank possible. Social mobility. The large landowners, for the most part, had all the positions of power. Okay. Most education in the middle colonies was received how? As an apprentice to a successful craftsman. The two main religious organizations in this region were the what? Anglican Church and Dutch Reformed Church. They were often at each other's throat. Why? Because they were competing for members and tax dollars. A typical government in the middle colonies had what three things? A governor, governor's council, and a representative assembly. Men were only allowed to vote if they owned property. The middle colonies had the most blank population. Answer diverse. Okay. Blank became the prime minister of Britain in blank year and immediately abandoned blank. Okay. He abandoned the policy of salutary neglect. That person was George Grenville, and the year was 1763. He asserted that the American colonists should have to what? Pay for British military protection. Even though the Americans claimed what? Not to need it. According to the blank, all American colonists were to stay east of the Appalachian Mountains. Answer: Proclamation of 1763. This policy was created, why? In order to protect the colonists in the wake of what? What had happened? And when? Chief Pontiac's Rebellion in 1763. What was Chief Pontiac's Rebellion? That's when Indians attacked the colonists and were subsequently slaughtered by the British. Okay, moving along here. What established a duty on basically any products that were not British in origin? Answer: Sugar Act. What year? 1764. Give me examples of products that were not British in origin. 3 of them. Answer: molasses, indigo, and sugar. Unlike the Molasses and Sugar Act, unlike the Molasses Act, the Sugar Act was what? Fully in force. Most colonists, did they like the tax or resent it? Of course they resented it. They felt it was being used to what? Fund the French and Indian War. What forbade the colonists from issuing paper money and stated all taxes paid to England must be paid in gold and silver rather than paper? Answer: Currency Act. What year? Answer: 1764. What required colonists to provide bedding and food to the regiments of British soldiers in America? Answer: Quartering Act. What year? Answer: 1765. What specified that a stamp must be applied to all legal documents indicating that a tax had been paid? Answer: Stamp Act. What year? Answer: 1765. What did this stamp indicated a tax had been paid for what? What was the tax used for? Answer: Defense of the colonies. This act was extremely unpopular and it was levied without the consent of the colonists. Its implementation generated loud cries of what? Answer: taxation without representation. The British responded with answer that they had virtual representation through members of parliament. Okay. The colonists created the blank in blank city in order to peacefully resolve the conflicts created by the Stamp Act. Answer: the Stamp Act Congress. In what city? Answer: Philadelphia. This group established the blank, which amounted to a boycott of English products. Answer: non-importation agreements. At the same time, who was doing what? Well, the Sons of Liberty were tarring and feathering stamp collectors, vandalizing British goods. They were erecting liberty poles where they would hang tax collectors from their pants. In blank year, the new British Prime Minister blank repealed the blank because why? So there's a lot of stuff there. In blank year, the new British Prime Minister blank repealed what? Because why? Okay, the year is 1766. The Prime Minister is Rockingham. And he repealed the Stamp Act. Why? Because the boycotts were damaging the British economy. Now, in blank year, the British Parliament issued blank. And this asserted that they had the right to legislate on behalf of the colonists at any time. This was the Declaratory Act, and it's in the same year, 1766. Okay, it's kind of in a response to the Stamp Act because They're like, okay, we'll get rid of this stamp back, but we're going to also pass a law that says we're allowed to pass laws and you have to obey them. Okay, that's wrong. What placed an indirect tax on household items coming into the colonies and tightened the customs duties? Answer: the Townshend Acts. Okay, that's word. The acts also called for stricter vice admiralty courts and established the blank writs of assistance, which were essentially what? Blank search warrants. The colonists' response to the Townshend Act was twofold. One, violent protests, and two, a pamphlet war. Let's talk about the pamphlet war first. Tell me 3 men who were engaged in the pamphlet war. John Dickinson, James Otis, Samuel Adams. Okay, give me an example of a violent protest. The Boston Massacre. What happened there? A mob in the Boston Commons was fired on by the British. Many say it was an accident. But the colonists used the massacre as a what? As a rallying cry. And the what was repealed? The Townshend Acts, with the notable exception of the tax on what? Answer T. Blank succeeded Townshend as the British Prime Minister in blank year. Answer: Lord North, 1772. In the same year, who did what? The Sons of Liberty set fire to the Gaspee. What was the Gaspee? A British revenue ship off the coast of where? Rhode Island. What was used? Okay, the blank formed to organize protests against the British and to keep colonists informed on British matters. Answer: committees of correspondence. The British MP blank became a folk hero in the colonies because of his impassioned speeches in defense of liberty. Answer: John Wilkes. Although Wilkes never spoke directly on behalf of the colonists, he was what? Jailed for his speeches. Okay. What was issued in response to the Boston Tea Party? Answer: coercive acts, also known as the answer: intolerable acts. What closed the port down until the destroyed tea was paid for? Answer: Boston Port Act, although this never actually happened. What put the colony under martial law? Answer: the Massachusetts Government Act. What required that all judges, soldiers, and tax agents be English and all crimes be tried in England? Answer: the Administration of Justice Act. What asserted that the British soldiers were allowed to enter private homes and demand lodging? Answer: the New Quartering Act. What declared that everything west of the Appalachians was Quebec? Answer: the Quebec Act. Of what year? Answer: 1774. This caused speculation among the colonists that what? Answer: the British were going to sell America to the French. What year was the First Continental Congress? Answer: 1774. And it was attended by, answer, a representative of every colony except Georgia. Now, the First Continental Congress issued 3 things. What were they? Answer: the Suffolk Resolves, the Council of All Colonies, also known as the Galloway Plan, and the Continental Association. The Suffolk Resolves, what did that say? Answer: that it would give Boston aid in the form of food and clothing, but it would not take up arms against Boston. The Continental Association, what was that? It was an agreement not to buy or sell English goods. We went out of order there from the way I listed them. And then finally, the Council of All Colonies, otherwise known as the Galloway Plan, was what? It was going to be a legislative body that would share power with Parliament. But this plan was gotten rid of by Massachusetts because they did not want to share power with British authority. Who was Thomas Gage? Answer: the military governor of Massachusetts. The British military governor of Massachusetts. He was under a lot of what? And when? Answer: stress in 1775. And he asked the British government for what? Answer, either 20,000 more troops or to repeal the coercive acts, otherwise known as intolerable acts. Instead, Britain sent what? Answer, 2,000 troops. What did Gage use these to do? Answer, collect guns and gunpowder. In blank year, the British troops sailed across Boston Harbor toward a large stockpile of guns. Where? Answer, 1775, and the large stockpile was at Concord. The colonists' response to this was who did what? Answer, Paul Revere took his famous ride to warn the colonists that the British were coming. What ended up happening with Revere? Answer, he was captured. And the ride was what? Answer, finished by Samuel Prescott and William Dawes. The British on the way to Concord, what happened? Answer, they killed 8 colonists in Lexington. And then they moved on to Concord where the real fighting began. Second Continental Congress, what year was it? And what city? I don't think I asked you what city for the First Continental Congress. Answer, 1775 in Philadelphia. Blank became the commander of the Americans. Answer, George Washington. Second Continental Congress drew up 3 things. What were they? Answer, the Olive Branch Petition, the Articles of Confederation, and the Committees of Safety. What was the Olive Branch Petition? Answer, a peace offering made to the King of England. What were the Articles of Confederation? Answer, basically an idea for a new government that would be, its strength would be in states' rights. And the Committees of Safety was what? It was a training system for all the community militias. And it was here that the colonists formally declared, answer, independence. Okay. At the time that the Declaration of Independence was issued, many colonists were for or opposed to complete separation from England. Answer, opposed. Why? 3 reasons. Answer, many still considered themselves Englishmen. Many were afraid to be branded as traitors. They didn't want to be considered a traitor. And 3, no revolt had ever been successful in winning independence. The minds of many of these reluctant colonists were changed, however, by what? The Battle of Bunker Hill, which was won by who? The British. But what did it show? It showed that we could fight with them. The British labeled the members of the blank as what? Second Continental Congress as traitors. And they ignored the what? Answer, Olive Branch Petition. The writings of blank also converted many colonists to the revolutionary cause. Answer, Thomas Paine. And of course, that was with the common sense writings that really motivated a lot of the colonists. Give an overview of the basics of the Declaration of Independence. Okay. The Declaration of Independence was proposed at what meeting? Answer, Second Continental Congress. And it was proposed by whom? Answer, Richard Henry Lee. And it was composed by who? Answer. It's hard for me to get breath. I'm doing so much talking here. Answer, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Robert Livingston, and Roger Sherman. The Declaration of Independence has 3 parts. Answer, what are they? Number 1, the preamble. Number 2, it's a theory of government. And number 3, a declaration of war. What was the preamble? It listed the reasons for separation. Theory of government is self-explanatory. It's a theory of government. And a declaration of war is self-explanatory. It was a declaration of war. The Declaration had many aims, 5 in particular that we talked about. Number 1, answer, to enlist help from other British colonies. 2, to create a cause for which to fight. 3, to motivate reluctant colonists. 4, ensure that captured Americans would be treated as prisoners of war. And 5, establish an American theory of government. Okay, so about the significance of the Declaration of Independence. It changed the war in America from what? Answer, a war for liberty to a war for independence. How did it do this? Answer, by rhetorically emancipating America from Britain. It also opened the path for what that would happen in history a few years later was a big deal. Answer, the French Revolution. The document would also be used by blank as an argument against slavery. Answer, abolitionists. And by blank as an argument for the right of women to vote. Answer, suffragists. The British military plan during the early stages of the Revolutionary War was known as the blank. Answer, Saratoga Campaign. What did it call for? Like, what was the Saratoga Campaign? Answer, it called for a three-pronged attack aimed at capturing New York and separating the Northeast from the southern colonies. Let's talk about each of those three prongs. Number one, answer, Howe was supposed to go up the Hudson River to Albany, but instead he decided to go after Philadelphia. Number two, General Burgoyne, number one was General Howe. Number two, General Burgoyne was able to conquer Fort Ticonderoga, but then he languished without supplies for months and eventually had to surrender to the colonists. And the third part of the plan was General St. Leger made considerable progress across New York from Lake Ontario, but he lost steam after a series of small battles. All right, Battle of Saratoga. Who defeated who? Answer, Gates defeated Burgoyne. What year? Answer, 1777. It convinced the French that the Americans could what? Answer, win the war. So the French did what? Answer, they signed the Treaty of Alliance. Which did what? Answer, supplied the Americans with money, men, and ships. Now, the French were not necessarily motivated by a spirit of goodwill. What were they hoping to, what was their agenda here? Answer, what they had hoped that they could gain back the territory they lost in the French and Indian War, and that they could also position themselves to colonize parts of North America that had yet been unclaimed. The British military campaign in the southern colonies was planned by who? Answer, Sir Henry Clinton. And implemented by who? Answer, General Cornwallis. In between what years? Answer, 1778 to 1781. Cornwallis quickly took what two cities? Answer, Savannah and Charleston. Then he faced a series of bloody battles where? Answer, North Carolina. This had weakened Cornwallis and forced him to what? Answer, make a supply run to Yorktown. And there, what happened? Answer, he suffered a naval defeat at the hands of the French. And then what happened? Answer, he was routed by Washington-led troops. And then during the retreat, the British naval forces were what? Answer, further weakened by a violent storm. And Cornwallis was finally forced to blank. Answer, surrender. And what year? Answer, 1781. Okay, after the conclusion of the Revolutionary War, colonists could suddenly move west across the Appalachians. Why? Two reasons. Answer, the proclamation of 1763 and the Quebec Act. None of those two applied anymore. At this time, there was a big movement by the states to do what? Answer, separate church from state. For example, give me an example of this. In blank state, blank wrote the blank, creating total separation in that state. Answer, Thomas Jefferson wrote the Virginia Statute of Religious Freedom. States also revised their blank in an effort to what? They revised their criminal codes in an effort to make the punishment more closely fit the crime. Now, around 1750, most citizens did not question the institution of slavery, but by 1780, many states began to examine this policy, and it actually led to what? Answer, Vermont being the first state to abolish slavery. The Articles of Confederation were largely ineffective because why? Answer, they gave too much power to the states and too little to central government. Part of the Articles was the blank, a plan created by blank for dividing the western land into organized townships. Answer, Land Ordinance of 1785. This plan was created by Jefferson. The blank divided the land above the Ohio River into 5 territories, which would soon become states. And this ordinance would become the model for how future states would be formed. Answer, Northwest Ordinance, 1787. Both the Americans and the British violated the terms of the blank. Treaty of Paris is the answer, which had ended the Revolutionary War in what year? Answer, 1783. The British, for instance, never what? Answer, fully abandoned their lucrative fur trade in the Ohio Valley. Americans, on the other hand, never what? Answer, paid back their pre-war debt. Okay, after the Revolutionary War, the United States found itself in a massive and troubling, answer, debt. Meanwhile, Congress had great difficulty passing any, answer, legislation. Because in order to be made into a law, a bill had to receive blank of blank votes. Answer, 9 of 13. And there were often fewer than blank representatives present. Answer, 10. The government had no blank, and thus law enforcement was left to the states. Answer, chief executive. Another major problem was the lack of a blank made it hard to resolve disputes between citizens from different states or between the states themselves. Answer, central court system. Congress did not have the power to blank the people directly and could only request funds. Answer, tax. Although Congress could issue blank, it had no authority to keep the states from issuing it. And thus, wild blank and blank were common. Answers, Congress could not issue, although currency is the first answer, and then wild inflation and depreciation were common. Okay, under the Articles of Confederation, Congress did not have the power to raise a what directly? Answer, army. It could only ask for troops from the states. What was partly in response to the economic uncertainty of competing currencies? Answer, Shays' Rebellion. What state did that take place in? Answer, Massachusetts. What 2 years did Shays' Rebellion take place? Answer, 1786 and 1787. So Congress cannot tax or raise an army, but also under the Articles, Congress did not have the power to what? Answer, regulate interstate or foreign commerce. In short, the Articles of Confederation left America unable to do what 3 things? Answer, maintain order at home, unable to gain respect abroad, and unable to improve its economy. Although blank delegates, all right, hold on. Let's ask this first. What year was the Philadelphia Convention? Answer, 1787. Although blank delegates attended the Philadelphia Convention of 1787, only blank signed the Constitution that emerged from the gathering. Answer, 55 delegates and 39 signed. Blank presided over the convention. Answer, George Washington. Blank served as secretary. Answer, James Madison. Now, the blank afforded to the people as well as to the states of different sizes was a contentious issue throughout. Answer, representation. Finally, in what is known as the blank, it was decided that the blank would be chosen by the people and the blank would be chosen by the state legislature. Well, it was decided that this decision was known as the Great Compromise, and it was decided that the lower house, House of Representatives, would be chosen by the people, and the upper house, the Senate, would be chosen by the state legislature. This convention also produced a blank, whereby each slave was to be counted as 3/5 of a person. Answer, 3/5 compromise. A blank was placed on the slave trade as well. Answer, 20-year moratorium. What year was the Constitution presented to the people of the states? Answer, 1787. The Constitution has 3 parts. Name them. Answer, 1, preamble, 2, the 7 articles, and 3, the amendments. What were the 7 articles? Answer, they outlined the powers and responsibilities of the 3 branches of government. What were the first 10 amendments? Answer, the Bill of Rights. The Constitution contains no bills of attainder, meaning that individuals cannot be denied what? Answer, life, liberty, and property without a trial. It does contain the concept of, answer, habeas corpus, meaning that what? Answer, individuals must be charged with a crime within 72 hours. The Constitution is famous for its system of, answer, checks and balances. How do the checks and balances work? Answer, whereby the president can veto Congress, but Congress can override the veto with a 2/3 vote. In order for the Constitution to take effect, it had to be blank. Answer, ratified by 3/4 of the states. The blank were those in favor of the Constitution. Answer, Federalists. The Anti-Federalists, tell me about them. Answer, they felt the Constitution was not truly democratic and it would take power away from the states and the individual. After the ratification of the Constitution, blank became inaugurated as the first president. Answer, George Washington. He immediately did what? Answer, went outside the Constitution to form his cabinet. Who was in that cabinet? Answer, 5 people. Jefferson, Hamilton, Henry Knox, Edmund Randolph, and Samuel Osgood. With the blank, it was decided that there would be 6 justices and 1 chief justice on the Supreme Court. Answer, Judiciary Act of what year? Answer, 1789. Federal courts also made sure that state courts did not what? Answer, violate the Constitution. This policy was inspired by what case? Answer, Chisholm versus Georgia. What happened in Chisholm versus Georgia? Answer, a citizen of South Carolina was able to sue Georgia. The United States was born with blank in debt. Answer, 80 million. Blank, however, was not terribly concerned by this. Answer, Alexander Hamilton. He encouraged blank as a means of financing the rapid capital improvements that would blank. Well, he encouraged credit, and this would aid in economic expansion. Hamilton introduced a blank where the government would blank. Answer, funding process. And they would buy back government bonds at full price in order to, answer, place money into the economy. Another aspect of Hamilton's economic plan was for the federal government to blank, answer, assume state debt. Why was this done? Answer, to tie the national government to the state governments. Or tie the state government to the national government. So I should say that. In order to pay off the national debt, Hamilton promoted the blank, which was a tax on imports, though it amounted to very little. Answer, Revenue Act. Of what year? Answer, 1789. Also, another attempt to generate revenue that was wildly unpopular. Answer, whiskey tax. What year? Answer, 1791. It was so unpopular it led to what? What happened? Answer, Washington was forced to call in state militias to deal with the uprising. Hamilton was also trying to establish a what? Answer, national bank, based upon the, answer, Bank of England. The blank was established with blank in capital. Answer, Bank of America with 10 million in capital. It had 5 aims. What were they? Answer, 1, to repay foreign debt. 2, provide a uniform national currency. 3, aid in the collection of taxes. 4, make loans. And 5, act as a federal depository. The United States stayed blank during the wars of the French Revolution. Answer, neutral. Meanwhile, the British were constantly blank. Testing this neutrality is the answer. There were 4 ways in which they were doing this. Answer, okay, number 1, they did not leave their posts in the Northwest. Number 2, they seized American ships. Number 3, they forced American sailors into service. And 4, they frequently aided the Native Americans in their conflicts with the United States. This conflict eventually led to the blank which made the Spanish fear an Anglo-American alliance and caused them to become more willing to discuss American use of the Mississippi River? Answer, Jay Treaty. In what year? Answer, 1794. Blank gave the United States free use of both the Mississippi and the city of New Orleans. Answer, Treaty of San Lorenzo, also known as, answer, Pinckney's Treaty. What year was this? Answer, 1795. What was the Jay Treaty? Put it into your words. The Jay Treaty of 1794. Answer, it aimed to what? Answer, calm post-revolution conflicts between Britain and the United States. The controversy surrounding the Jay Treaty led to the formation of the first, answer, political parties. The first two political parties in the United States were, answer, two of them, the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans. Let's talk about the Federalists. Who was the primary figurehead associated with the Federalists? Answer, Hamilton. What did they want? What was the Federalist platform? Answer, they wanted a strong central government but a loose interpretation of the Constitution. Who were the two figureheads of the Democratic Republicans? Answer, Jefferson and Madison. What did they advocate? They advocated a strong central government but a strict interpretation of the Constitution. They also wanted what? A close relationship with France and to closely restrict government spending. Which was the party of the wealthy Northeasterners and which was the party of the so-called common man? Answer, the rich Northeasterners were primarily Federalists, and it was mostly the common man of the South and West who were Democratic Republicans. In 1796, Washington decided he was too tired to continue as president. In his famous final speech, which is known as a what? Answer, farewell address, he implored the United States to avoid these three things. Answer, 1, permanent alliances, 2, political factions, 3, sectionalism. In long story short, to summarize, he stressed to avoid entangling alliances. There were some significant improvements during the Washington presidency, 5 in particular. 1, he avoided war at a time when the nation was vulnerable. 2, he avoided those political alliances. 3, he promoted the national government without alienating a lot of people. 4, he oversaw Hamilton's creation of his economic system. And 5, he guided expansion to the West. Let's talk about the election of 1796. Blank became the second president of the United States in the election of 1796. Answer, Adams, John Adams. His opponent, Blank, became vice president because he received the second most electoral votes. Answer, Thomas Jefferson. Adams was immediately what? Answer, confronted by the French, who were angry about the what? Answer, the Jay Treaty and the broken Treaty of Alliance. After that, the French began to what? Answer, destroy American ships. So what did Adams do? Answer, send American diplomats to meet Talleyrand. What did Talleyrand do? Answer, he demanded tribute and snubbed the Americans. What followed then? Answer, an undeclared naval war between 1798 and 1800. During this time, what was established? Answer, the Department of the Navy. Finally, at the blank was torn up and the blank was agreed upon. Answer, at the Convention of 1800, the Treaty of Alliance was torn up and the Treaty of Mortefontaine was agreed upon. Okay, tell me what the Alien Act is. Answer, it increased the number of years before one could obtain citizenship. It gave the president the power to deport anyone and allowed the president to jail dangerous aliens during times of war. What was the Sedition Act? It made it a crime to libel or slander U.S. officials or policies. Wow, that's not good. Many people believe this policy was a violation of, answer, the First Amendment, of course. The Alien and Sedition Acts were established when? Answer, 1798. The blank promoted by Jefferson. Okay, hold on. So good. Now that I gave that away. The blank promoted by blank stated that a contract exists between the state and national governments, but the national government had exceeded its authority and broken that contract. Answer, the Virginia and Kentucky resolves, promoted by who? Two people, blank and blank. Answer, Jefferson and Madison. This document also advocated that states should have the power of, answer, nullification over national policies. In the election of 1800, the Federalists were represented by blank and blank. Answer, John Adams and C.C. Pinckney. And the Democratic Republicans by blank and blank. Answer, Jefferson and Burr. The Federalists had been weakened both by what? Answer, the unpopularity of the Alien and Sedition Acts, and also the internal feud between Adams and Hamilton. In the election, what happened? Well, Jefferson finished with the same number of electoral votes as his running mate, Burr. What did Burr do? Answer, he surprisingly refused to concede. This situation led to what? Answer, the 12th Amendment, which says that what? Answer, that a candidate must stipulate his desired office, what he's running for. What ended up finally happening in the tie-breaking vote? Answer, Jefferson won the tie-breaking vote. Thomas Jefferson went on to introduce the blank, replacing Federalist office holders with blank. Answer, spoil system and Democratic Republicans. He also reversed many of the Federalist policies. Answer, the Alien Act was repealed and the Sedition Act expired. The blank, otherwise known as the blank, was passed by the Federalists in order to cement some of their judges in place. Answer, Judiciary Act of 1801, also known as the Circuit Court Act. Jefferson then in turn forces through the blank, which removes all 42 of these judges. Answer, Judiciary Act of 1802. Blank was one of the Federalist judges removed from office by the Judiciary Act of 1802, and having been promised a job brought up the issue with blank, who pleaded ignorance. Answer, that was Marbury bringing it up to Madison. The issue became so contentious that it led to what? Answer, going all the way to the Supreme Court in a case called Marbury versus Madison. In what year? Answer, 1803. Now, although Section 13 of the Judiciary Act of 1789 had a blank, which required Madison to honor the appointment, Chief Justice Blank declared the section to be unconstitutional. Answer, writ of mandamus, and the Chief Justice was John Marshall. Why was this an historic act? Answer, it was the first time the Supreme Court declared a state law to be unconstitutional. Let's talk about the Federalist period. The Federalist period had some remarkable successes and some bitter failures. Let's talk about some of the successes under Hamilton. Under Hamilton, it saw what? Answer, establishment of the national bank and treasury system. The United States amazingly was able to what during this period? Answer, pay off all its debt. The Federalist administration can also be credited with these four things. Answer, maintaining international neutrality, establishing Pinckney's Treaty, crushing the Whiskey Rebellion, and getting the British out of their Northwest Post. Now, let's talk about some of the bad things. The Federalists became known as an elitist party, and what was really unpopular? Answer, Alien and Sedition Acts. The blank was seen as a diplomatic failure by most Americans. Answer, Jay Treaty. And in general, the Federalists were not able to what? Answer, maintain relations with Europe, especially France. In 1795, the corrupt Georgia legislature sold some land known as the blank for almost nothing to a group of northeastern speculators in exchange for a blank. Answer, Yazoo claims, and it was for a bribe. In 1802, the land claims were ceded to the national government, and Jefferson decided to grant the speculators a cash settlement. Blank, however, was the chairman of the House committee responsible for paying the settlement, and he refused. Why? All right, this was John Randolph, and he refused to make the payment, saying the deal was bathed in corruption. Though the Supreme Court eventually granted the settlements in what case? Answer, Fletcher versus Peck. What year was that case? Answer, 1810. Randolph was permanently alienated from, answer, Jefferson, and he went on to form a group called the, answer, Tertium Quids. This group was ultra-conservative, pro, answer, states' rights. The blank was probably the high point of Jefferson's presidency. It was seen at home as a diplomatic victory that also avoided drawing the United States into conflict with European powers. Answer, the Louisiana Purchase. It destroyed the, answer, Federalist Party. After the Louisiana Purchase, explorers were set out to discover what had been purchased. Two of these famous explorers were, answer, Lewis and Clark. Tell me how we acquired West Florida. Answer, rebels attacked Baton Rouge and Madison claimed that West Florida was now part of the U.S. What year did this occur? Answer, 1810. How did we acquire East Florida? Well, first Andrew Jackson would lead a group of soldiers in the East Florida. What year did this happen? Answer, 1818. And then the Spanish reluctantly did what? Answer, signed the Treaty of Onus, in which the U.S. formally acquired East Florida for $5 million, which the Spanish promptly returned to pay off some of their debt to the U.S. What year did this happen? Answer, 1819. In an agreement between what two countries did Napoleon acquire Louisiana? Answer, the two countries involved were France and Spain. What was that agreement called between France and Spain that allowed Napoleon to acquire Louisiana? Answer, the Treaty of Ildefonso, otherwise known as, answer, retrocession. Napoleon was made anxious by a rebellion in Haiti and a renewal of hostilities with the British, signed over 800,000 square miles to the U.S., making the blank the what? Answer, the Louisiana Purchase, the largest land acquisition without bloodshed in human history. Why did Napoleon do this? Answer, he was hoping to curry favor with the United States in order to stall out a possible Anglo-American, English-British U.S. alliance. After losing his challenge for the presidency in 1800, blank was left out of the 1804 election and became embittered. This is our favorite card. Answer, Aaron Burr. He then lost the bid for the governorship of New York, in part because of the mudslinging of blank, Alexander Hamilton. At this point, Burr began to toy with what idea? Answer, of forming his own country in the West. Hamilton, hearing of this plan, did what? Answer, told Jefferson. Burr promptly did what? Answer, challenged Hamilton to a duel. What happened? Answer, Burr killed Hamilton in a duel in 1806. What does Burr do then? Answer, he heads west and plans to start a new country in Spanish-controlled Louisiana. Jefferson, hearing of this, does what? Answer, formally charges Burr with treason. What is the final result of all this? Answer, Burr is found not guilty. Okay. The most important event during the dominance of the Jeffersonian Republicans was the blank. Answer, War of 1812. In blank year, Jefferson declared what about American ships? Answer, 1803, declared that they were neutral. This annoyed what two countries? Answer, France and Britain. So what did they do in response? Answer, the British passed the Orders in Council and the French passed the Berlin and Milan decrees, all of which were designed to do what? Answer, weaken American shipping in Europe. So the U.S. responded with what? Answer, the Non-Importation Act of what year? Answer, 1806, though this was largely a failure. Then what happens? Well, the British attacked the Chesapeake in what year? Answer, 1807. This leads Jefferson to do what? Answer, issue the Embargo Act of what year? Answer, 1807. What did the Embargo Act of 1807 do? Answer, it forbade American ships from leaving for foreign ports. It was very unpopular and was repealed soon after, 1809. Okay, in the 1808 election, blank of the Democratic Republicans easily defeated blank. Answer, Madison easily defeated Pinckney. Madison continued Jefferson's policy of blank. Answer, peaceful coercion. With respect to what two countries? Answer, France and Britain. Madison convinced Congress to pass the blank, which forbade what? Answer, the Non-Intercourse Act of what year? 1809. And it forbade what? Answer, trade with Britain and France until they began treating American business fairly. When the British ambassador blank vowed to improve the treatment of American business, Madison agreed to what? Answer. Okay, the British ambassador's name was David Erskine, and Madison agreed to trade with England. Madison replaced the Non-Intercourse of 1809 with what? Answer, Macon's Bill. With the Macon's Bill number 2. What did Macon's Bill number 2 say? Well, it said that America would be open to trade with any country, but there were special considerations for France and Britain in particular. If either France or Britain agreed to neutral trading rights with the U.S. would immediately cut off the other country. So if France agreed, the U.S. would cut off Britain. If Britain agreed, the U.S. would cut off France. What country jumped at this opportunity? Answer, France. Now, the British, weakened by the American embargoes and by a bitter winter, rescinded the blank, although the U.S. had already declared war upon them. Answer, the Orders in Council. Hang on one second. Do something here. Okay. After the British Prime Minister was assassinated, the new Foreign Secretary blank tried to mend relations, but the U.S. went to war anyway. Answer, Castlereagh. The blank was very unpopular, especially among Federalists in the Northeast. Answer, War of 1812. Many Americans felt what? Answer, that England could not be beaten. The conservative members of Madison's party, known as the blank, answer, Tertium Quids, opposed the blank, answer, War of 1812, because of 4 reasons. Answer, 1, it would be too expensive. 2, destroy America economically. Those 2 are similar. 3, would result in a perpetual standing army. And 4, would lead to the acquisition of Canada as a slave state. These critics were opposed in Congress by the, answer, war hawks. They supported the war for 3 reasons. Number 1, they thought it would boost foreign trade. 2, it would discourage the British from helping Native Americans. And 3, could result in land gain. In selling the war to the American people, Madison stressed 2 things. Number 1, the British insult to American honor. And number 2, the stories about Americans being forced in the British military service. The U.S. fought against Britain for 2 basic reasons. Number 1, namely to gain more land, and 2, to destroy alliances between the British and Native Americans. Americans had become incensed when, following his defeat to the Americans at Tippecanoe Creek, blank did what? Answer, Chief Tecumseh fled north in the British-controlled Canada. This provocation provided enough popular support to declare war. But unfortunately, the American military was both blank and blank. Answer, unprepared and overconfident. Most American military strategists thought what? Answer, it would be easy to take Canada. But there were 2 problems. Answer, the Army had only 35,000 troops at the time, and the First Bank of the United States had just gone defunct, which meant there were very scarce economic resources to support a war. Okay, at the blank, in September of 1813, the American commander Perry secured Detroit for the U.S. Answer, Battle of Lake Erie. At the blank, the American General Thomas McDonough secured northern New York from British invasion. Answer, Battle of Lake Champlain. At the blank, the American General William Henry Harrison defeated a coalition of British and Native American forces, and Tecumseh was killed. Answer, the Battle of the Thames. Andrew Jackson scored a decisive victory at the blank. And during this war, much of Washington, D.C. was blank. The battle of Horseshoe Bend, and much of Washington, D.C., including the White House, was torched. A crucial point of the war came when the U.S. was able to successfully defend blank outside of Baltimore. Answer, Fort McHenry. This conflict inspired the composition of what? Answer, Star Spangled Banner. Written by? Answer, Francis Scott Key. At the blank, Andrew Jackson used a ragtag collection of soldiers and pirates to defeat the British Navy. Answer, Battle of New Orleans. Okay. Throughout the War of 1812, there was loud opposition from the blank. Answer, Federalists. At the blank, they did these three things. Answer, at the Hartford Convention, they formally blamed Madison for the war. They proposed changes to the Constitution whereby a 2/3 vote would be needed for declaring war or for admitting a new state into the Union. The War of 1812 required several agreements to fully restore relations between the U.S. and Britain. Let's talk about them. The blank returned Anglo-American ties to their pre-war terms. Answer, Treaty of Ghent. The blank formally declared that there would be no naval race between the two countries. Answer, Rush-Bagot Treaty of what year? Answer, 1817. At the blank, a line was drawn along the 49th parallel dividing Canada from Louisiana, and it was declared that the two countries would jointly occupy Oregon. Answer, the Convention of 1818. In the blank, a western boundary for Louisiana was set, and the Spanish renounced their claims to Oregon. Answer, Adams-Onis Treaty of what year? 1819. All right, we have 10 cards left. Put that aside. Okay, the War of 1812, did it accomplish its supposed goal? Answer, no. What was its supposed goal? Answer, establish neutral trading rights for American ships. Nevertheless, from Madison's perspective, that's funny they list that as a goal because that wasn't listed as one of the reasons for main reasons for going to war. Anyway, nevertheless, from Madison's perspective, the war could only be seen as a answer, major success. Why? Answer, two reasons. The United States lost no major territory, and they scored enough victories to keep the British from being able to make any extreme demands. Blank exploded in the U.S. at this time. Answer, nationalism. The success of the War of 1812 effectively drove the final nail into the coffin of the answer, Federalist Party. Madison became extremely popular at this time. Two reasons. Answer, a prospering economy and the success of the War of 1812. Blank was booming at the time. Answer, manufacturing interests, to be precise. This sense of national identity was strengthened by the emergence of the United States' first generation of, answer, post-colonial artists. A uniquely American style of blank developed, led by blank. Answer, architecture, led by Jefferson. I'm not sure there's anything that Jefferson didn't do, apparently. The blank produced a group of painters influenced by the natural beauty of their region. Answer, the Hudson River School. Among them, who? Answer, John James Audubon. In 1816, Madison declared that the government should, what? Three things. Increase the army, increase the national debt, and increase banking interests. An agenda oddly reminiscent of federalism. The blank was shown to be necessary by the War of 1812, but it had two problems. Answer, the Second Bank of the United States. The two problems, it was poorly organized and came to be known as a money monster. The blank was established to protect fledgling industry. It was popular in the blank and unpopular in the blank. Answer, the Tariff of 1816, popular in the Northeast, unpopular in the South. Much of the tariff money went to developing infrastructure, and the new method of blank invented by blank enabled the creation of long thoroughfares. Answer, paving, invented by John McAdam. In the election of 1816, the Democrat Republican blank defeated the last Federalist candidate blank by a landslide. Answer: James Monroe defeated Rufus King. Monroe's early term was not without its problems, however. A mild depression caused by over-speculation on Western lands led to the blank. Answer: Panic of 1819, and began a answer 20-year boom-bust cycle. These problems were exacerbated by the blank. Answer: Second Bank of the United States. The bank was very unpopular for two reasons. Answer: their pressure on so-called wildcat banks to foreclose on properties, as well as the unwillingness of the bank to loan money. Let's talk about some big Supreme Court cases. Marbury versus Madison. What year? Answer: 1803. What two things did it establish? Answer: gave the judicial branch more power and gave more power to the national government over the states. McCulloch versus Maryland. What year? Answer: 1819. What two things? One, the national bank is allowed by the Constitution, and states cannot tax a federal agency. Gibbons versus Ogden. What year? Answer: 1824. What two things? Right of Congress to regulate interstate commerce, and indeed federal regulation of just about anything. Fletcher versus Peck. What year? Answer: 1810. What two things? The sanctity of contracts, and also establish a right of the Supreme Court to declare state laws unconstitutional. Okay. After a series of revolutions in Latin America, the United States was the first to recognize the blank of the new countries. Answer: sovereignty. Why was this? Well, three reasons. Answer: number one, because the revolutionaries had used the United States as inspiration. Two, the U.S. preferred to have weak, independent nations nearby as neighbors. And in three, because the U.S. wanted to maintain and expand its lucrative trade with Latin America. The British attempted to persuade the U.S. to sign an agreement preventing foreign intervention in Latin America. But Monroe decided to maintain American independence and issue his own document. This document was known as blank. Answer: Monroe Doctrine. It had two main principles. Answer: non-intervention and non-colonization. Getting there. The 1820s and 30s are known as the era of, answer, Jacksonian democracy, which was, answer, political, rather than, answer, economic or social. In years after the conclusion of the War of 1812, it was generally considered that America was safe for democracy, and thus blank was extended to the poor people in many states. Answer: suffrage. Blank was the old system in which candidates were chosen by a small group of powerful men. Answer: King Caucus. The new system, however, did maintain the tradition of blank, another word for spoils system, in which newly elected officials would fill the government offices with their supporters. Answer: patronage. Election of 1824. All the major candidates in the 1824 election were blank. Answer: Democrat Republicans. Although blank received more electoral votes than blank in the 1824 election, he did not win a majority. That was Andrew Jackson received more electoral votes than John Quincy Adams. What happened in the runoff? Answer: in other words, who won the runoff? Answer: Adams. John Adams won. Quincy Adams was a fierce blank at a time when many in the country were sectionalists. Answer: nationalists. Adams was still believed to be out of touch with the common man, and he further alienated the middle and lower class with the blank, known in the South as the blank. Answer: the Tariff of 1828, known in the South as the Tariff of Abominations. Blank was an especially ardent Southern voice who futilely proposed that states should have the ability to what? Answer: John Calhoun, and the ability to nullify federal regulations. Good thinking. The election of 1828 is considered the first blank in American politics. Answer: Modern campaign. Blank had the first campaign manager, produced buttons, posters, and slogans to support his candidacy. Answer, Andrew Jackson. Meanwhile, the incumbent, Blank, did what? John Quincy Adams ran a very formal campaign. What ended up happening? Who won by considerable margin? Answer, Andrew Jackson. What was his inauguration like? Answer, it was an overcrowded, chaotic affair, and he suffered 3 cracked ribs during the festivities. These 4 men are credited with the beginning of the Democratic Party. Answer, Andrew Jackson, Martin Van Buren, John Calhoun, and Kendall, Amos Kendall. Oh, wow, we're the last card. Okay. Blank is often seen as a symbol of the rising power of the New West, or as an embodiment of the rags to riches fable. Answer, Andrew Jackson. He spent much of his presidency trying to promote the idea of blank at a time when most of the country was ardently sectionalist. Answer, nationalism. During his presidency, he dominated Congress. How? Answer, he vetoed more legislation than all of the previous presidents combined. He was also famous for his so-called what? Answer, kitchen cabinet, which was a group of close advisors without official positions. Hope you're having a great summer vacation and with everybody you're seeing up there. All right, bud. Love you.